so many forms of fear, both physical as well as psychological, psychosomatic fears. One may be afraid of the dark, physically, or one may be afraid of one's wife or husband, or what the public says or thinks or does. Or one may be afraid of this sense of loneliness, or the emptiness of life, the boredom of a meaningless existence that one leads. Or one may be afraid of the future, the tomorrow, the uncertainty, the insecurity, the bomb. Or one may be afraid of death. The ending of one's life. So there are various forms of fear. Neurotic as well as sane, rational fears. If fear can ever be rational or sane. But most of us, apparently, are neurotically afraid of both the past, of today, and of tomorrow. The things that one has done in the past, or the ill health that one has had in the past with all its pain and agony, and not wanting it repeated. And is one afraid of that? Tomorrow. One is afraid of time. Growing old, getting senile, depending on another. So there is fear of time, fear of the past and of the future. And this fear of loneliness, of death, of public opinion, of not conforming, not being able to succeed, not being able to fulfill, not being somebody in this stupid world, and so on. And there are so many fears. Not only conscious fears, fears that one is aware of, but also there are fears deep down, undiscovered, unexplored, in the deep recesses of one's own mind. So the question is not only how to deal with the conscious fears as well as those that are hidden, the fear of time, that is, yesterday, of the things that one has done, the repetition of that misery of tomorrow, the uncertainty, the insecurity, both psychological as well as physical. And there are the fears of great loneliness and the escape from that loneliness. Surely, fear is a movement away from what is. The flight, the escape, the avoidance of actually what is. The movement, the flight away brings about fear. And none of these problems of fear can be resolved through will. Saying to oneself, I will not be afraid. And act of will has no meaning. It has, you have had pain yesterday. That's obvious, you have had it. Or there is some hope tomorrow, which might not come about. So, there is fear of yesterday, there is fear of tomorrow. How does that fear come about? Right? You are asking the question, not I. So you are working hard. I've had pain yesterday, obviously. And there is the memory of it, and not wanting it again tomorrow. How does fear come into this? Thinking about the pain of yesterday, thinking the memory of yesterday's pain projects the fear of tomorrow, of having pain again tomorrow. So thought brings about fear, right? No? You're following this? Thought. Thought brings about fear, breeds fear, and also thought cultivates pleasure. To understand fear, you must also understand pleasure. Because they're interrelated. Without understanding one, you can't understand the other. Which is, you can't say, I must have only pleasure and no fear. Because fear is the other side of the coin, which is called pleasure. Right? We are following each other. So, there was pleasure yesterday, sexual or different kinds of pleasures. You think about it. The image through the cut of pleasure, which is thinking about it. And you may not have it tomorrow. So thought engenders fear. So then the question is, if thought is doing all this, thought that refuses to examine the hidden unconscious fears, the thought that has set the analyzer separate from the thing to be analyzed, thought that has brought in time as a means of escaping fear, but sustaining fear, and thought also nourishing pleasure, which has nothing whatsoever to do with joy. Because joy is not the product of thought. It is not pleasure. You can cultivate pleasure. You can think about it endlessly and derive great pleasure. But you can't do that with joy. The moment you do that, it has gone. It's become something from which you derive pleasure, and therefore which you are afraid to lose. So thought is responsible for both pleasure, pain, fear. Thought has created a center as the me. Me, my opinions, my country, my God, my experience, my house, my furniture, my wife, my children, my country, me. That is the center from which you act, think. That center divides. And that because of that center and that division, there must be conflict. Obviously. When it is your opinion against somebody else's opinion, my country and your country, all that, division. Which means the center is always dividing. And if you think from that center and observe from that center fear, you are still caught in fear. Because that center has separated itself from the thing it has called fear. And therefore it says, I must get rid of it, I must analyze it, I must overcome it, resist it, and so on. So you are strengthening fear. So can the mind look at fear, which you are going to a little bit more, without the center? Can you look at that fear without naming it? Because the moment you say fear, it is already in the past, because you have named it. You're following all this? Because the moment you name something, don't you divide it? The white and the black and the brown and the communist, and don't you? And so that very division is a form of resistance, conflict, and fear. So the question is to observe without that center, and not to name the thing called fear as it arises. All this requires tremendous discipline. The word discipline means to learn from somebody. You're not learning from the speaker, you're learning from yourself. And to observe all this very closely, with care, which which means with affection and attention. Then then the mind is looking without the division as a center to which it has been accustomed to. Therefore there is an ending of fear, both the hidden and the open. If you haven't done it this evening, don't take it home and think about it. Truth is something that you must say immediately. And to say something clearly and immediately, you must give your heart and your mind and your whole being.